نحمد ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh from the studios of Radio Al Ansar. It's me, Anwar Mullah, and it's the Business Matters program. Yes, if it's Monday evening, then it's Business Matters. Just gone 15 minutes past 7 on the 26th of February. And if it's the last day in February, then it's got to be the budget that we're all talking about. Yes, this program brought to you by the Minara Chamber of Commerce. And we were all eagerly awaiting the budget speech that took place last week, Wednesday. Minister of Finance giving us the good and the bad and the not so good and the not so bad news. And normally we would have our dear friend Yasmin Suleiman in the studio unpacking the budget for us, as she so eloquently does for us each year. Unfortunately, Yasmin's away on a well-deserved break, and we have a more than adequate replacement tonight to discuss the budget, the economy, and everything around the economy. And he is none other than Mr. Bashier Adam. He's joining me on the line. And just to introduce him, he is the managing director of the accounting firm Nexia SAB&T, or he's the CEO of Nexia SAB&T. He's a chartered accountant. He also has the titles of CIA and CRMA. Not too sure what that means, but maybe he would fill us in. He's got 28 years of experience in auditing, accounting, consulting, and the global business sector. And Mr. Adam also serves on the international and EMEA boards of Nexia International. So a very, very highly qualified and experienced chartered accountant with us tonight to unpack the budget. And with that, it's Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Mr. Bashier Adam.
Alaikum salam, Anwar. How are you?
Well, thanks. Bashier, which part of the country are you joining us from?
Currently in Pretoria.
Excellent. Bashier, welcome to Radio Al Ansar. Thanks for giving up part of your Monday evening to be with us. You obviously very, very, very highly experienced in the accounting field. And I'm sure you would have been eagerly listening to the budget speech last Wednesday as well.
I think all of us were sitting glued to wherever we were to listen to the budget speech. And I think given the context of this budget and it being an election year and all of those nice things, we were eagerly waiting to see what was going to happen. And I must say, Anwar, there was nothing spectacular in the budget.
I was just about to ask you, because the words that have been bandied around are boring, unexciting, nothing new to speak about. So we're speaking about a budget tonight, and again, most people are saying, well, it was a very kind of a anticlimax, so to speak, type of budget.
Absolutely, I must agree with it. I think it was very much an anticlimax in terms of the budget. But I think one must look at where we are and the context of this budget. Besides it being an election year and the minister being fairly constrained in what he could and couldn't do, I think we also need to consider that as an economy, we're just so hamstrung at the moment that there's not a hell of a lot we can do. Our tax limits are reached. Our tax base is being stretched to the limit, and with seemingly no end in sight. And there's only so much that a very narrow tax base can burden and shoulder to take forward. So I think it is he found himself between a rock and a hard place, to put it mildly. And there wasn't a hell of a lot he could do about it. I think there were one or two smokes and mirrors in the budget that makes things look slightly better than they actually are. But I think those are the things we'll chat about.
Okay, let's start with the basic things. And normally each year we kind of look forward to some sort of what we call bracket creep in terms of our PAYE or pay as you earn. And this year, unfortunately, we were disappointed.
Anwar, we were indeed disappointed, which effectively means that come the 1st of April, when what would have been the new tax tables would have been implemented, everyone would have got a little bit of relief. And this year, depending whether or not your salary is revised upwards in excess of the inflation rate, we're all going to find ourselves a little bit poorer as a result of there being no bracket creep. So just to put it simply, bracket creep is increasing the brackets to cater for the effects of inflation. We didn't have it this year, which means any increment that happens in salary and income goes into the next tax bracket, which is a higher tax bracket.
Okay. Off the top of your head, would you be able to kind of tell us what would be the base at which one starts paying PAYE? At what monthly or annual salary would that be?
It would be in the region of about 100,000, just over 100,000.
Okay, and I know there's different tax tables for people over the age of 65, and then also for people over the age of 75, where there is some concession or tax relief for the more elderly people.
Well, there is indeed, but I must also tell you that those are the people that normally benefit from inflationary adjustments to the tax rebates that they get. And by and large, the elderly people get higher tax rebates than we do, than the younger working class does. But again, the rebates were not adjusted in any way for inflation this year.
Okay.
So even they have to bear some of the brunt.
And by not allowing for bracket creep, how much of extra income will that bring into the fiscus?
The minister is touting a number of around 16.2 billion rand. So really, it's 16.2 billion rand being taken out of the pockets of consumers who are already cash strapped in a high interest high inflation environment.
Okay, the next talking point generally is what we call the sin taxes, and that would be alcohol and tobacco by and large. What can you tell us about the minister's news on sin taxes?
So sin taxes never gets away unscathed. It's probably the one thing that we can bank on sin taxes, and of course we do it behind the cover of health of the population and all of those nice things. But both alcohol and tobacco products and even vaping liquids have been subject to sin taxes. All of those increases are above inflation increases. So I don't have the rands and cents at hand, but everybody who lights up every now and again to deal with the stress, and those that socialize weekends with a drink are going to have to fork out a little bit more for those luxuries in life.
Okay. On the government's revenue generation strategies, okay, so you'll raise a little bit from the fact that there's no bracket creep and you'll get some money in from the sin taxes. But how else is the minister proposing raising enough money to so-called balance the books or balance the budget?
Anwar, to be frank, I don't think there is a big plan as far as that goes. The budget doesn't talk very much about revenue generation strategies. What it does talk about is cost constraint strategy. So they're looking at pulling in costs over the next 3 years as opposed to generating significant revenue. I had a look at the numbers a little bit earlier today, and they expecting or they're budgeting over the next 3 years for revenue to increase roughly 6%. Now, if we know where government's inflation targeting is, it's in the 6% range, right? 3 to 6% range. So I don't think there's a concrete plan for revenue or additional revenue generating strategies. There's certain things that they are talking about that I think they're looking towards gaining efficiencies and effectiveness in their spending programs that hopefully will translate into further investment and spending by consumers, and in so doing increase revenue going forward.
Yes, we all hope and wish for a inflation targeting of between 3 and 6%. Unfortunately, we haven't been achieving that for a while, which means that's one of the reasons why our interest rates keep being set at such high levels, and we're all hoping for some sort of a relief, maybe in the second half of this year from the high inflation and not the high interest rates, and to try to see if that can be brought down, which again should put more money in the pockets of consumers. But we know that when salary increases, and especially government salary increases, government employee salary increases are announced, then there's always an outcry because there's this disparity between what is being offered and what is being asked for. And normally, to prevent strikes, and we have an election year in front of us, so government would want to keep its employees happy to get the votes. There's always a disparity and threat of strikes and sometimes actual strikes. And government normally caves in and gives in to these salary demands. So as much as they're trying to curb spending, there's always the counter whereby they have to give in to their employees.
Anwar, I couldn't agree with you more. I think very simple. They've put aside a significant of money over the next 3 years, specifically to support shall we call it the core public services. So health, education, police, peace and justice, where they've actually ring-fenced specific amounts of money just to cover and supplement and keep secure those public service employees. So they've actually ring-fenced additional budget for the wages of those specific public sector workers. And what they've done is they said that the remainder of the public service would have to be paid out of their baseline budgets. Now, I can tell you from experience, that's not going to happen. So the big risk that we have there is that we're not going to be able to contain the spending on public service wages simply because there's going to be an outcry when that goes above inflation, and certainly when it goes above what's in the baseline budgets.
Okay, so not such good news on that front either.
Certainly not. It's something I wouldn't bank on it. I wouldn't bank on them pulling back those costs significantly at all.
Okay, let's talk about the government grants that are given out each month, the social security grants, the elderly grants. Any good news there for the pensioners?
I think for the pensioners, there has been a bit of good news. They've increased some of the grants by 100 Rand, and 100 Rand, we all know, doesn't take you very far in today's, or with the cost of living as it is today. They've broken that up slightly into a 90 Rand effective now and 10 Rand effective from October onwards. More importantly than those grants that do have increases. So that's the old age grant. The foster care grant goes up by 50 Rand a month, and the child support grant goes up by 20 Rand a month. But I think more importantly than that is there is, one will remember the COVID social relief grant. Remember that one?
Yes.
Right, so that's the 350 Rand a month grant. Now, that one was supposed to be there only for the COVID period, right? The social relief distress grant. And then it's been extended, and it's been extended, and it's been extended. And now we have some 10 million people dependent on that grant. So it's going to be very difficult, in my view, for government to withdraw that grant without causing serious upheaval for itself. They didn't make much mention of that grant. It's not gone up at all, but they said they are re-looking at it and will revisit it in April. So as it stands, the grant goes to the end of March. I think the question is, what is that grant going to be replaced with? And I think it's actually going to move away from a COVID-19 social relief distress grant to a grant of a more permanent nature, maybe a basic income grant or something along those lines. But there's no way we're going to tell 10 million people that we're stopping the 350 Rand a month that they've been getting.
Okay, Bashier, we talking about all of these budget, what it's giving and what it's taking. But the reality is we're sitting in a situation where, if I read correctly, we got 3 million taxpayers in South Africa that are carrying the can for the entire country. And that is not a lot of people to be tapping continuously, whether it be, income tax is obviously the easiest one, but tapping them from various sides, whether it's VAT or other taxes that they've been subjected to. Even when you die, you still got to pay estate duty over a certain amount. So even when in debt, you don't escape taxes. But I mean, how long is this going to be sustainable? Because we have a situation where 3 million people are carrying the can for the entire country. And I'm saying close to 50 million people. And that is, in my eyes, a recipe for disaster.
Anwar, I don't think it's only in your eyes. I think in the eyes of every taxpayer in South Africa, and I certainly think about the more developed economies in the world, including the world financial institutions like the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, don't see our situation as being sustainable going forward. Now, to put that into context, you're absolutely right about the number of taxpayers. But can I tell you that to break it down even further, 200,000 taxpayers, 200, not 3 million as you allude to, 200,000 taxpayers pay 32% of all tax in the country.
Wow.
200,000 people.
Okay.
200. Now, if we put that in, now remember those 200,000 people in context are the 200,000 people that could afford to immigrate should they choose to do that.
Right.
Those are the 200 people that are from a net worth position, one of those or those people that would be welcomed by other countries because of the capital they take with them.
Right.
But those 200 people are also the people that in many cases are the entrepreneurs and the captains of industry, right? So they produce or they create employment and they create jobs and they bring innovation and they bring know-how and they keep the economy ticking. Now, can you imagine those people having to bear a bigger brunt? Okay. It's also those people that buy the cars, right? So then now we're going to the fuel levies, right? It's also those people that use the toll roads, right? That contribute to the tolls. Every other tax comes down to those people. And if you're going to do that calculation and you say, if we bring in all the indirect taxes to those people, what would their effective tax rate be? My guess, I did a couple of matchbox exercise a few years ago. I reckon you're close to 70 cents in the rand that they pay in total taxes.
That's a phenomenal amount of taxation. That would put us as one of the highest tax countries in the world if you analyze it.
It'll put a few individuals that carry the can in that as the highest taxed in the world, because remember there's a whole lot that are below the tax threshold. Right?
Okay.
And we can go further with that, right? South Africa's got what 80, 100, 200,000 companies registered. If I tell you that 700 companies, 770 to be exact, pay over 95% of all corporate tax in South Africa. How would that sound to you?
Yeah, it doesn't sound too good.
Less than 1,000 companies.
Okay, on that score, we need to talk about revenue and where revenue is coming in. I think we kind of got saved in the last few years because the mines were bringing in a lot of revenue. However, I'm looking at some of the reports that have been coming out recently from the mining sector. Some big companies like Anglo-American Platinum, Nordems in the platinum sector. But generally, the resources and mining companies are all showing massive declines in their earnings for the year. Now, we're talking about earnings that could be in the region of 90%, in some cases 91%. One of them I read, I think it was Nordems. And their revenues have dropped, which means that they're going to be paying a lot less tax. But more than that, they're also talking of shedding jobs. And I'm not talking about a few jobs, but in some cases 4,000 jobs, some cases 400 jobs. And if you add all of those together, then you got a massive amount of people that are going to be losing their jobs as well, simply because the resources prices are so low. Your thoughts on that?
I know that. Doesn't it sound like the perfect storm that's brewing, if we think about it? Because, and I've said it over the last 2 years, we were fortunate in that with the commodity prices, we got significant windfall taxes in the last 2 years. And what happened was we budgeted, or we based our budgets and our medium-term budgets on the windfall numbers, which was never going to be sustainable, right? That's now come back to bite us with the corporate income tax for the year being 39% less than what was budgeted for, right? And that's only for this year. And that's going to carry on and flow into next year. Now, if we look at that and we take on top of that the fact that we're shedding jobs, which has a direct impact on the personal taxes we collect, right? We have that happening on the one hand, and then we have SARS that's doing everything in the book, and they're doing it right by employing technology, artificial intelligence, et cetera, to get the last cent of tax out of those people. Somewhere something's got to give.
Okay. Well, it's telling on our employment rates, right? Our employment rates came out and our unemployment rates are going up. I mean, we're sitting at about 33%, I think, 32 or 33% unemployment in the country.
Yeah, Anwar, I think that's also slightly deceiving because while the number is between around 33%, if you break that down into youth unemployment,
right,
they're closer to between 45 and 50%. Now, if we think about the future of the country, if we think about the energy of the country, which means we've got an aging workforce, and the younger people aren't coming into the system from an experience and a growth and a contributory perspective. And on a net basis, what are we? We're building a society of takers as opposed to providers and contributors.
Okay. Bashir, we're going to go for an ad break. We got to pay some rent here at the studio. And on the other side of that ad break, let's try to create some positivity. Tell us something about some of the positives that maybe is coming through, that you as a chartered accountant are seeing on the horizon, that some of your customers may be experiencing. And also, there was something quite unusual in the budget for the first time, and that was the minister saying that he's going to tap into our gold reserves. So perhaps you can talk a little bit about what that really means and how much of income that will bring into the fiscus as well. So let's just go for an ad break. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. If you've just joined us, it's the Business Matters program with me, Anwar Mullah. It's the budget presentation speech that we are unpacking tonight with my esteemed guest, Mr. Bashier Adam, who's the CEO of Nexia, SAB&T, a well-established and reputable accounting firm in South Africa, very well known. And he's using the 28 years of experience that he's got in auditing, accounting, and consultancy to unpack the budget for us tonight. And unfortunately, so far, it's been a bit of a doom and gloom budget. Not much good news. But Bashier, let's just talk about this new thing of tapping into the reserves. How is that going to help, and what does the minister have in mind?
All right. So Anwar, this was one budget where many of us learned a new acronym, right? We call the acronym GFECRA. Effectively, it stands for the Gold Foreign Exchange Contingency Reserve Account. Okay. Now, this is an account that sits in the books of the South African Reserve Bank. And effectively what it does is, if over the years the country goes and buys dollars, and let's, for the purpose of this, assume that we bought dollars at 10 Rand a dollar.
Right.
And if the Rand depreciates over that period, as we all know, our Rand has only depreciated, it hasn't gone the other way. That dollar now becomes worth 20 Rand.
Okay.
That additional 10 Rand we account for as a surplus in our books because the asset we hold is worth 10 Rand more, right?
Okay.
So now we have this value, for lack of a better word, because it's important to realize it's unrealized. We don't have the money. We don't have cash, right? We've got an accounting entry that has now grown to over 500 billion Rand.
Okay.
Right? Purely because of the depreciation of the Rand over time. Now, in line with global, and I must say we've got to give this one to government, they're now taking us back to, or they're trying to align us with global standards. In terms of the global standard, it says if we redeem some of that surplus, right, the 500 billion asset that we've got, we can apply it to reduce, in our case, our debt. Right, and that's exactly what government is saying. We're going to dip into that reserve account. We assume that we're going to have to realize some of it to make it happen.
Okay.
And we're going to use that to apply our debt or to bring down our debt. Now, I know that's an important statement, because if we're going to do that and we're not going to bring down our debt, then we're just digging a deeper hole.
Okay.
All right. If, however, we take that and we use it to redeem some of our debt, we should face lower interest costs going forward. And we haven't touched on that earlier. But if you think that 20 cents of every rand of tax that we pay goes to debt servicing costs, if anything we can do to bring that down would make a difference in the lives of the average South African.
Okay, so Bashier, if this dollars had been bought previously, and as you rightly say, they've been bought maybe at 10 Rand, and now the Rand is close to 20 Rand or 19 Rand, whatever, then there's been this build-up of an asset, and I'm saying in inverted commas, an asset there. But then that those dollars have to be sitting somewhere, am I right? They should be sitting, it has to be in the possession of somebody or someone at this moment in time.
And it's in the possession of the South African Reserve Bank.
Okay. Are we sure it's there? Because like everything else, has it not been stolen?
You asked me to say something good for a change, right? I'm telling you something good. And now you're looking for the downside. No, I think we've got to take it. I think the most important thing is, one, remember the South African Reserve Bank is run fairly autonomously, right. And its integrity has been in check up to now. Right. It also falls under its direct reporting line is to National Treasury, which I think is also one of those institutions that has kind of stood the test of time and managed to maintain its integrity through the dark years. And we've got to trust that stays in place.
Okay, Bashier, we've got about just over 10 minutes. Let's run through the other parts of the budget sometimes that we overlook. The one part that I look at quite anxiously is the government last year had given a tax incentive for what they call a Section 12J investment, 125% tax write-off into green energy or solar. I think that's being done away with after the 2025 tax year.
So not the business one, the individual one, the 25% has been done away with.
Okay.
The business one is still there until 2025, right? The individual one falls away at the end of February this year.
Now, I'm talking about the I'm talking about the Section 12J incentive, which is 125% of your investment can be written off.
It's the 12BA investment, right? So 125% of businesses that invest in solar at the end of 2025, or it's still in place until the end of 2025. I think we'll find, depending on what our infrastructure or our electricity demands are at the time, that may be extended in some form or the other.
But at the moment as we speak, it's being done away with at the end of February 2025.
Yeah, at the end of February 25, it disappears.
Okay. Other parts of the budget that you may want to touch on?
So interesting. I think I've spoken a little bit about the debt service costs. If we can't bring our debt down, we're going to be in trouble. We're talking about debt currently peaking at 77% of GDP. For emerging economies, GDP, the optimal ratio or the sustainable ratio is in the region of 60%. So we're way over that. If we look at our BRICS partners, Brazil's forecast to grow at 3%, India's forecast to grow at 6%, China's forecast to grow at between 4 and 5%, and we have a measly 0.06% that we're banking on. Okay. Right. So somewhere we've got to get that going, and we've got to get growth done. Interesting. I think the one thing the government did touch on is, and this goes against government policies, right? Government policies has been very much against privatization of services. But if you read the budget, there's been a lot of talk about public-private partnerships, facilitating them, writing, enabling laws to facilitate public-private partnerships happening. So public-private partnerships are becoming a real thing. We saw it last year with the sale of SAA. It hasn't gone through, but with the sale of SAA. You'll recall with Transnet and everything that's happening there, governments thought about or has brought in third-party participation into the rail network. So that's happening. You guys sitting down in Durban has got a private partner that's now looking at refurbishing the container terminal down in Durban. So very much against what government has stated for the last 28 years or 29 years. There is an element of privatization happening, albeit the fact that it's not called privatization. But I think there's a realization that we can't do this on our own, guys. We've tried it and it didn't work.
Okay, tell us about the National Health Service.
I think it's about 35 years away. We cannot fund it. With all the best intentions in the world, we cannot fund it. So very quickly, right, put this into perspective. In terms of the draft bill as it stands, right, government can say to a doctor, this is where you must work and this is where you must do this and this is where a patient must go for treatment. The day he signs that bill, the next day he'll be in court because all those provisions are unconstitutional.
Wow, that's quite a strong statement.
Well, think about it. Think about it. Our Constitution, the principles enshrined in our Constitution is the freedom of choice, the ability to choose where you go and what you do if you can afford it.
Okay. Well, I think we probably will end up paying double. We'll be paying towards the NHS and being taxed for that. And then a lot of us who want that private service would still end up being contracted to private medical aids at the same time.
Absolutely. Anwar, I think it's very simple, right? If you want NHI to work, we've got to get our hospital infrastructure right. We've got to get our public health right. We've got to get all of those things right. Now, there's a number of countries in the world where their public health systems are equivalent to their private health systems.
Yes.
It's as simple as that. And if we can get to that stage, then by all means, bring the NHI and we'll all use it. But I think at this stage, it's certainly not where it should be. The other thing government's spoken quite a bit, or that's come out in the budget, Minister was quite bullish about it, is that we're doing a lot to combat corruption and crime. We're giving more money to the State Capture Commission reform to make that happen. And we're employing 10,000 new police officers. But we did the same thing last year. And what happened when our crime stats came out a couple of weeks ago? Almost in every aspect of crime, we're escalating, we're increasing.
Okay. Yeah. On a more micro level, I was speaking to a friend today who runs a very big car dealership, and he was complaining bitterly about the fact that car sales have taken a plunge. But one of the critical things that he said to me was that for every 100 applications that they're filling in for finance on behalf of customers, on average, only 5 are being approved, which means that the average Mr. Joe Soap out there or the average citizen of the country, he's completely indebted, either in default or living beyond his means. And as much as he wants to buy a car or, uplift himself in other ways, he just can't afford to.
Absolutely, and I think it's a product. It's a product of one the tax rates that we're going to be burdened with, and we're going to be burdened more. The high inflation that we've been running with for the last few years, the high interest rates, because most people think about if you've got a bond of R1 million, every time there's 100 basis points or 1 percentage point in the bond rate or the interest rate going up, that's another R1,000 that needs to come out of your disposable income.
Correct.
Right? And let's think about it realistically. People, it doesn't matter what the interest rate is, you still have to eat, right? You still have to educate your children. You still have to put petrol in your car. So those costs aren't going anywhere. You asked for some good news, so here's one. What he didn't do this year was he didn't, for the first time in probably 20 years, 25 years, he didn't increase the fuel taxes, right? And the reason he didn't increase the fuel taxes was if he had to do that, the knock-on effect of an increase in the fuel price to everything else, from food to education to public transport to everything else, would just have a further negative impact on inflation.
Okay. I'm going to put you on the spot, Bashier, and say, if you were the Minister of Finance and you had to do things slightly differently in terms of the budget, what would you have done differently?
Probably the first thing I'd do, but I've been saying this for 20 years and nobody listens to me, Anwar, is I would loosen up the grip on exchange controls, and I'd open the economy up to the world. So let people, make it known to people that we're open for business. Bring your money here, come and invest here, and you can take it out freely together with the gains and profits that you make on it.
Okay.
So that would be one of the first things. And there's so many case studies around the world, and one that's very close to South Africa in terms of where they've come from and where they are is Malaysia. And when Malaysia opened up their economy, it just flourished. But we've got an inherent fear in South Africa that if we open it up, all the capital is going to flee. Now, I'm going to say this and put myself on the spot. If capital was going to flee, it fled already.
Okay.
Right? Everybody wants to do things the right way. And I think if we open up our economy to that, I think we'll see different results.
Well,
I think we'll attract much more investment. And that's where we are. And a very simple one that comes with that. If you, I don't know if you've been fortunate enough to visit Europe lately, but if you're in Europe, you hardly hear the cars because they're all electric cars, right?
True, and much so in China as well, which we have been quite recently.
Exactly. So they're all electric cars. What did we do? We said, yes, 100%. We are incentivizing manufacturers of electric cars with tax incentives to come set up plants and build their cars here. What's the problem with that?
Okay.
What's the problem with that?
Well,
do we have the electricity to power the cars?
Yeah, true. But for now, we actually taxing electric cars quite heavily. So there's not much incentive to buy electric cars as we speak. Maybe that will change in the future.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that's where the minister's going with that incentive. Is saying to the motor manufacturers, come and produce your electric cars here, and we will give you the tax incentives to be able to build it. And you know, the other thing you asked is, what would I do differently? Just get the private sector involved in things. I don't know when last you posted a letter in South Africa, but it never gets there. It never, ever gets there, right? But when you send it by Postnet, it gets there, right? So if the private sector are given the chance to step in, we'll fix South Africa. This is not the end of the world, right? We'll fix South Africa, right? But government's got to believe that we're all on the same side. We all want to fix it. We all want to do the right thing, because the private sector will do it. They'll step up, but they need to step up with less government interference and red tape to make things happen.
Interesting observations, interesting comments, but how true. Bashier, thanks so much for joining us tonight. I think we echo similar sentiments. I could go on speaking to you for another hour or two, but it's been lovely chatting to you. Thanks for sharing your thoughts and sentiments. And inshallah, when you're down in Durban, we want to rope you into the studio to come and have a discussion with us on some other aspects of the economy and on finance. But thanks for sharing your 28 years of experience. Lovely comments, well thought out in terms of the budget, and a pleasure talking to you. Anwar,
for having me, and thank you very much to the listeners that dialed in.
Okay. Yeah.
All right.
With that, it's wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And inshallah, I'll be with you next week on another Business Matters program. Assalamu alaikum.